Kentucky saw their 8-year bowl streak come to an end in 2024 with a surprisingly disappointing 4-8 season. A season where they lost 6 of their 8 games by double digits, but then at the same time, only lost to Georgia by 1, only lost to Vanderbilt by 7, and also pulled off an upset win on the road at then number 6 Ole Miss. So a disappointing season for the Wildcats, a wildly inconsistent one too, but now heading into 2025, things aren't looking much better. Yes, they should be much more competitive. Yes, they should be better statistically, but it might not translate to wins with such a brutal schedule. Take a look at the roster. This offense, guys, last year was a major reason for Kentucky's struggles. It was absolutely horrendous. And I know they battled some injuries. I know there was just so many mixture of things that went wrong for Kentucky offensively, but they only averaged 20.6 points per game, only 330 yards per game. And get this, they played 9 games last year against Power 4 opponents. The Wildcats mustered just 12 touchdowns in those games. So 8 SEC games, 1 game against Louisville, 12 touchdowns in those 9 games against Power 4 teams. Absolutely horrendous. Hoping that'll change this year. They're bringing in a veteran quarterback, Zach Calzada. Does that name sound familiar? Bounced around in the SEC quite a bit. Played at Texas A&M, played at Auburn, but now most recently at Incarnate Word, which was a great move for him, and he shined at Incarnate Word. Over 3,700 yards, 35 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions last year with the program. He comes in looking to revitalize his career with a third SEC team. The running back core is deep. You've got Dante Daddle in at running back from Nebraska. You've got Seth McGowan, and you've got Jamarian Wilcox, who rushed for nearly 600 yards last year, was the leading rusher for Kentucky. So a veteran quarterback, a trio of running backs at their disposal. Yes, they do lose their top 2 wide receivers, but Jamori Macklin is back. Transfers J.J. Hester is in from Oklahoma. Kendrick Law in from Alabama. Troy Stellato in from Clemson. So some veteran wide receivers here looking to make a name for themselves with the Wildcats. And then the offensive line will be 10 times better. They gave up 35 sacks last year. Now have over 170 combined starts up front. So this offense should be drastically better, and they definitely should average over 3 touchdowns per game, unlike they were able to do last year. Defensively, that really wasn't an issue for Kentucky last year. They had some dogs, man. 22.1 points per game. That's all they were giving up. But again, naturally, the defense can only do so much when their offense isn't helping them out. Defense gets really tired when the offense is turning the ball over or going 3 and out and things like that. Can't sustain drives. 22.1 points per game, 346 yards per game. Those numbers both actually improved from the 2023 season. 4 of their top 6 tacklers now return for Kentucky, including Jordan Lovett and J.Q. Hardaway in the secondary, a secondary that only gave up 184 passing yards per game last year. The defensive line looks really, really good, and they bulked up with McQueese Humphrey Grace, who was a first-team FCS All-American selection at South Dakota last year, 9.5 sacks at the FCS level, was a finalist for the FCS Defensive Player of the Year award. So an unbelievable pickup for Kentucky. David Gusta comes in from Washington State as well, and the linebacking core returns Alex Afari, who was 3rd on the team in tackles, 62 tackles, 9.5 tackles for a loss. All in all, Kentucky, again, roster-wise, looks more complete. They should be a lot better on both sides of the ball, but they face a schedule that is absolutely brutal. I mean, just take a look at that. Obviously, Toledo's not going to be easy, and we'll get to that in a second, but Ole Miss, at South Carolina, at Georgia, they draw Texas, who will be one of the best in the SEC this year. Tennessee, of course, at Auburn, who's going to be drastically improved. Florida, who's going to be pretty solid. Vanderbilt, who is very, very experienced. And then, of course, Louisville, their in-state rival. So, I mean, it just... The only way I think the schedule gets a little bit tougher is if you trade a few teams out for, like, Alabama and LSU. But, it's about as tough as you get. They opened the year up against Toledo, and they cannot afford to overlook the Rockets. This Toledo team is really, really good and really, really experienced. They've got a veteran quarterback returning in Tucker Gleason. Chip Traynham is in at running back. Couple Power 4 stops throughout his career. Loaded wide receiver core, maybe the best wide receiver core in the MAC, and maybe a top 30, top 40 wide receiver core in the nation. Their defense only gave up 23 points per game last year. This Toledo team went into Starkville and destroyed Mississippi State last year by 24 points and then beat Pittsburgh in their bowl game. So they beat 2 Power 4 opponents last year. This is not a game that Kentucky can afford to kind of overlook, a game where Kentucky can go out there and work out some issues with a new offense and a new quarterback. They've got to bring their A game to beat this Toledo team. It will be close. It will be close. I think Kentucky wins, though. I think Kentucky wins. The Wildcats are able to get the job done at home, but I would not be surprised to see this game being close entering the fourth quarter, and maybe this game ended up being decided by just one possession. That's how good this Toledo team can be, arguably the best team in the MAC heading into 2025. They then get Ole Miss at home, a revenge game for Ole Miss, but a chance for Kentucky to show that last year wasn't a fluke, right? I mean, this is an Ole Miss team that now loses tons from last year. Jackson Dart is now gone. Those great wide receivers are now gone. Lots gone on defense, especially on the defensive line. So I don't really think that Ole Miss will get too much pressure on Zach Calzada, considering how strong this Kentucky offensive line is going to be. You look last year, they beat Ole Miss 20-17 in Oxford as 15-point underdogs, held Ole Miss to a season-low 353 yards of offense. The Kentucky defense did their job, and now they're going up against an Ole Miss offense that typically, and I expect this year is going to be good because you've got Lane Kiffin as your head coach. Of course, they're going to have a solid offense, but only the second game with Austin Simmons as their starter. So definitely some question marks there for the Rebels. But in the end, I do believe Ole Miss is the better team. I think they want revenge. They're going to take it out on Kentucky. I think Austin Simmons is the real deal. He's got an underrated core of wide receivers. Maybe not as good as they had last year. But Lane Kiffin, once again, adding a lot of big names through the transfer portal on both sides of the ball. The Ole Miss defense, not going to be as bad as people think it's going to be. Not going to take as big of a step back as people think it's going to be. I think the Rebels come in, get the win on the road. I think it's relatively close. I don't think they're going to come in here and blow them out. But the Rebels will get the win. Kentucky is 1-1, and they'll be 2-1 heading in to their bye week after they defeat Eastern Michigan. So 2-1, a quarter of the way through the season. Only lost to Ole Miss. Nothing to frown about there. Then the schedule gets really, really tough because they're earning the bulk of conference play. I guess we can just kind of cut to the chase to an extent. They're 2-1, and I think they're going to lose their next 6 games. So, no bowl game for Kentucky. And I know a lot of Kentucky fans are going to be maybe livid with that or frustrated with that, but I mean, look at that schedule and find me a win there. They're not going to beat South Carolina on the road. This is a good South Carolina team, one that I actually have picked probably lower than most people just because of how difficult their schedule is, but I wasn't factoring Kentucky into that difficulty. South Carolina came into Lexington, won 31-6 last year over the Wildcats. Kentucky has lost 3 straight games to the Gamecocks, averaging just 11 points per game in those losses. The Gamecocks, once again, going to have a strong defense, a Heisman contender at quarterback in Lenora Sellers. The Wildcats aren't going to go win that game in Columbia. It's not going to happen. They're certainly not going to win on the road at Georgia. Again, a national title contender. They're 50-4 at home. Under Kirby Smart, Kentucky no shot winning that game in Athens, despite only losing by 1 point last year to the Bulldogs. They come out of their second bye week, which is still relatively early. They get Texas, who is an elite national title contender as well. Arch Manning going to be the head man there. Last year, they kind of held their own against Texas, only losing by 17 in Austin, but they were still outgained by over 200 yards. And by this point in the season, I do believe Texas will be figuring things out. Arch Manning going to come into himself. You've got the wide receivers going to be getting a lot better. The defenses will be one of the best in the nation. I don't really think Kentucky's offense is going to have enough to exploit that. They then get Tennessee, who they only lost to by 10 last year. Maybe you argue this being a trap game for Tennessee. The Volunteers are going to be coming off a game on the road at Tuscaloosa. Maybe they're a little hungover from that game. Maybe Kentucky's offense is able to get something going against that Tennessee defense. But the Tennessee defense is going to be a strength of their team. If anything, the storyline would be, can Tennessee's offense, without Nico Iamaleava, without a lot of the playmakers that helped maybe make the college football playoff last year, can they get something going against this Kentucky defense, which I do expect to be very strong once again? That's the storyline I'm watching out for. But again, by this point in the year, I think Joey Aguilar is figuring things out. With Josh Heupel's offense, that defense isn't going anywhere. Defense travels well. Kentucky, I just don't think gets the win at home. On the road at Auburn, they lost to them by 14 points last year. Now, this is the make or break year for Hugh Freeze on the Plains, but they added a lot to the transfer portal. Good talent through the transfer portal. Don't really see them winning that game at Jordan-Hare Stadium. And then Florida, another rivalry game there. Maybe a trap game there for Florida as well. The Gators will be coming off a Georgia game. Maybe they beat Georgia and they're riding the high and they have a letdown game. Maybe they're hung over after a beatdown against the Bulldogs. So Tennessee and Florida, both coming off very tough games. Kentucky gets them both at home. Maybe they're able to snag a win there. I just don't think so. This Florida team, I think another team that's going to be better than their final record shows. I think DJ Lagway is the real deal if he can stay healthy. This defense is really, really good. Kentucky lost to the Gators 48-20 last year. I don't think they're 28 points better. I do think Florida has improved since last year. They're going to get the win, and the Wildcats are 2-7. Make them 3-7 with a win over Tennessee Tech. But then we'll have them lose their last 2 to Vanderbilt and Louisville, both on the road. Vanderbilt, they lost to by 7 last year. The Wildcats were 12.5-point favorites over the Commodores. People just still weren't buying into Vandy at that point yet. Vandy made sure to shut them up. Wins the game by 7 with a very balanced attack of 145 rushing yards and 143 passing yards. It really wasn't electric on either side of the ball, but their defense doing a very good job against that lackluster Kentucky offense. Now Vandy returns Diego Pavia. They return one of the most experienced teams in the country. Based on returning starts and production, Vanderbilt has that, one of the best in the country. Doesn't mean it's going to translate to a bunch of wins, but at home, I do think they can get the win over Kentucky. And then on the road at Louisville, the Wildcats saw their 5-game winning streak over their in-state rival end last year with a 41-14 loss to the Cardinals, allowing 358 rushing yards. Now Louisville is loaded again on both sides of the ball. That running game still there. The offensive line still there. Great quarterback play in Miller Moss transferring in. 8 starters back on defense. This is a Louisville team that could be a dark horse in the ACC this year. Wildcats are not going to have enough to go on the road and win that game. Not against a team with that much talent. Not against a Louisville team that will have a lot more to play for in the final week of the season than Kentucky will, entering at 3-8. With all that being said, we've got Kentucky going 3-9, and I know a lot of people are going to be livid. You don't know what you're talking about. We're going to win 7 games. We're going to win 8 games. It's not going to happen. I even went through and found some toss-up games. I got 4 games, guys. 4 games that I look at that think maybe Kentucky could maybe win, right? If things go their way, if they're better than we expect, maybe they beat them. And that's Ole Miss, Tennessee, Florida, and Vanderbilt. That's it. So let's say Kentucky wins all 4. They're 7-5. Congratulations. You'd have to win 3 of those 4 toss-up games that I have in mind. I don't really think they're fully toss-ups, but 4 winnable possible games there. 3 of them just to go bowling. You split them, you're still 5-7. Better than 3-9, sure, but still doesn't get you anywhere. This is not a bounce-back season for Kentucky. Despite the additions to the transfer portal, despite the fact they're going to be significantly better on offense, despite the fact that I love Mark Stoops and think he's done a phenomenal job with this program, all of that is great. It's not going to translate to a winning season. It's not going to translate to a bowl season because the schedule is simply too difficult. It is too difficult. Toledo is not a given. No SEC game is a given. Louisville certainly not a given in there. I got 3-9 for the Wildcats, winless in conference play. I just don't see them snagging a win there. Again, the most winnable, I would say, are Ole Miss, Tennessee, Florida, and Vandy. Kentucky will be underdogs in all of those. And again, going to need to win 3 of them if they want to get to the postseason. Just don't see it happening in 2025. So guys, as always, thank you so much for watching us here at the Gridiron Expert on YouTube. Make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos, and check out everything down in the description below. That includes our website, thegridironexpert.com, home to our expert picks, some of the best college football and NFL spread picks in the entire country, beating out over 80% of the national handicappers for the last 6 years, so do not miss out on that. Don't miss out on our weekly newsletters as well, also on thegridironexpert.com. All of that can be found down in the description below. Become a member of our GE Nation. And once again, as always, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time right here on The Gridiron Expert.